We'll start slowly since people are just getting out here now. So I'll be the lucky person who has to resume in the middle of the day because it's like 40 degrees outside. So my own presentation will not be as interactive as the rest, unfortunately. But basically I'll present a page that is very close to Cypriot, which some of you might know. It's called Rhomios. And the topic today will be mostly focused on how to navigate the social media landscape when it comes to talking about Cypriot dialects. So what do I mean precisely by this? In order to explain that, we have to explain what the Rhomios page is for people who don't know. As the bio says, it's about history, linguistics, ethnography, folklore, and everything that's Cypriot. And even though it might seem a bit daunting, you see the picture right there, it's basically kind of an amateur passion project. But the main goal of it is to be kind of an online archive of psychology, so Cypriot-related stuff of all types, and also to serve as a community for people who want to learn about Cyprus. That could involve Cypriots in Cyprus, Cypriots in the diaspora, people who are not Cypriots who are in Cyprus and are interested in learning about the place they live in, or just people who are not in Cyprus, who are not Cypriots and just want to learn about these things anyway. And the important thing which I highlight here is that it's sort of an attempt at what I call sober social media education. And the natural question is, what do you mean sober? And we have to first talk about how social media typically is. You probably already know. Usually when you have interactions, public interactions on social media, it's usually casual and low stakes. So people are just kind of messing around. They don't really have to put second thoughts on what they're going to say. It's mostly anonymous or pseudonymous, so people are not using their real names, like in this case, or using some kind of profile picture that's not theirs. And of course, like I said, it's mostly public. And what this means is that usually when people write comments, they're not doing some intricate research to explain that kind of thing. And of course, they're not going to cite any sources. They just say, I made it up. So that's my source. Very often, those conversations can become uncivil or impolite. So the usual thing is that there's name calling, people who like fighting the comments, but sometimes it's just people who don't take each other seriously. And at the end of the day, it becomes somewhat performative. Because it's public, people want to seek the approval of the other people, so they will say things that are more liked by the general audience, and they will want to get like more likes, more shares, or whatever. For the Cypriot dialects, it's even worse, because the subject is culturally significant, so people care more about it. It's tied to people's identity, which means that it's a more contested kind of topic, and of course it becomes politically sensitive, which means that it becomes like a more, it's usually tied to questions about the Cyprus problem, about the situation in Cyprus, about politics in Cyprus. So the comment sections are even worse. And these are some examples. So as you can probably see, these are not the finest specimens. You know, some people will claim the usual thing, Cypriot Greek is just an ancient Greek dialect. Cypriot Greek and Standard Greek, no, they have nothing to do with each other. Someone says Cyprus is Greek, someone says it's just a giant mess of people who want to say what feels comfortable to them. And so the point is that even if those comment sections are moderated, or even if we go further and we look at how creators themselves approach those topics, it's very easy to fall into common pitfalls of the same type. So because the audience has these ideas, it's very common for creators themselves to resort to stereotypes. So a lot of creators themselves might say, oh, did you know Cypriot Greek is like an ancient Greek dialect or whatever, which is usually either to get engagement because they know people will like it, or it's because it's something they use it as, as a joke. A lot of the times they regurgitate myths and a lot of misconceptions that are common among people who talk about the dialects. And of course, they themselves, because they might seek like easy engagement, they might not do enough research for the things that they talk about. It's kind of like a vehicle to their goal of reaching an audience and not really the main topic. And even when you do have creators who might be more, well-read, you have what I call here the dialectic trap, which is when the creator spends most of their efforts just responding to these myths and misconceptions, which is fine to do like sometimes, but if, for example, someone keeps seeing these comments and keeps seeing other posts and they dedicate their entire platform to just responding to someone else, it communicates a kind of negativity, like, oh, you're wrong, and I'm correcting every one of you. So it doesn't communicate the positive aspect of learning. So sober social media education in this case would be more proactive rather than reactive. So you present a topic, you talk about it, and you don't have to like constantly be in dialogue with the people who are wrong. You just have to say what you like. It's neutral both in taking sides, it doesn't take sides, but also in the language, using careful, neutral language, being objective. It's more nuanced in the sense that there's no covering of all the complications of things. So we don't present things and say, oh, this is exactly how things are and nothing else. There are more things that people can learn, which they can uncover through more reading. And at the end, it's more sourced, but not in an absolute sense. Because let's say I choose 3 or 4 sources, someone else might choose 3 or 4 sources of their own which are different. They might disagree, they might say slightly different things. So an important aspect is to introduce ambiguity. Not everything is absolute. You don't know precisely every single fact. So what is the typical structure of a Rhomios post? Usually it starts with design on a topic. I didn't write that here, but it's usually what happens over some period of time. I pick some relevant historical visual material. It might be old photographs, it might be some illustrations, some maps, whatnot. Then add the explanation with text over it, which is usually prepared beforehand as it's divided as how I'm going to say in each kind of slide. As you can probably see here, it's about the common word between Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot Greek. Yeah, we have underage people here, so I won't say what everyone means. But Everton in Cypriot Greek, for anyone who's interested, it means like something that was found, which is usually for an abandoned baby. So you see the connection why it means that. And then you continue for like 10-20 slides where it's more of the same thing with then a complementary caption with some extra explanations and the sources. So to give you a slight example of what this post might look like, I'll just go over it really quick. So it starts something like this, some title. For example, some shared Cypriot and Cypriot Turkish words that don't mean exactly the same thing or mean different things. Now, one example is puli is puli. So puli is in Cypriot Turkish just means chicken. In Cypriot Greek it's any bird. There's some explanation in the next slide. Then we have yerimo and yerimo, which is kind of a generic curse word. The case we saw earlier, which I don't have to repeat. Chatal, which is interesting. Chatal, it's not really used in Cypriot Turkish, it's mostly standard Turkish word, which is like fork. But in Cypriot it's actually pants, which is interesting. Then we have Kuella, that's an interesting one. I mean, you can kind of see the logic behind it. So Kuello, Cypriot Turkish, still like someone not very intelligent, let's call it like that. But Kuella literally means like a female sheep. And it is sometimes used in Cypriot for someone like who's not very intelligent, but it's kind of obsolete at this point. Orphanan or Fanon. So this is kind of an example of a cultural aspect to it. So because Orphanon literally means an orphan, Orphanan in Cypriot Turkish came to mean like a houseworker or a maid, because it was usually young girls who were orphaned that would take up this job traditionally. And then we have Jesuris and Jesur. I don't have to explain every single one. You get the idea. And we end. I can't tell about this one. So, Vorto in Cypriot Turkish is just generally like a villager kind of type, uncouth person, not doesn't have manners. And it's used similarly in Cypriot Greek. You might hear zoportos, like as a word. But typically the literal meaning is like a male mule, and it also is used, it's a not very politically correct term to call fat people, I suppose. And we end with some kind of call to action, which is usually trying to involve the audience. So since we said we are trying to create a community where these are discussed, then the point is to ask, okay, have you heard about these things? And if you have heard something else, share that. And of course, a lot of people know things that I didn't know when I was making the post. Some people might introduce it somewhat of a difference, that is a fine point that wasn't mentioned in the post. And so the conversation carries on from there. And after all of this, we just kind of contrived. Once someone might ask, what's the point? Which is a valid question. But at face value, one can say that it's just interesting, like sharing fascinating facts about things. So if you have some knowledge of Cyprus that is interesting to other people, at least for me, I feel like it's nice to share in general. It's also to bring attention to lesser known topics. So some things are well known, like Commandaria and Templar Knights or the Knights of St. John. But sometimes it's topics that not many people know about. So it's nice to bring attention to those things. And of course, because there's always this room of, well, this is just part of the picture, it's to incite people's curiosity, to tell them, go ahead, read more, it's really interesting. But at a deeper level, one could say that through these things, we also learn to appreciate more and celebrate Cyprus and Cypriot identity, because if someone has an incomplete or a distorted picture of what Cyprus is and Cypriot culture is, they might make some negative assumptions. So they see the post and they're like, oh, that's not so bad. I didn't realize that there's actually interesting things. It's also a way to connect Cyprus to their roots. So this is particularly true for Cypriots in the diaspora. A lot of the things are helping them sort of connect to things that maybe their grandparents knew or their parents knew, but they themselves have grown to drift apart. And of course, like I said, it's one step in improving the social media discourse about Cypriot dialects. So to introduce kind of a reference point where things can be discussed without the negativity we saw before. For example, I don't allow comments from non-followers, so trolls and people who wouldn't engage with the page otherwise don't have to come in and leave mean comments or whatever. And so if there is a mission, let's say, to the page, it would be this creation of this online community that serves as a safe space, so to speak. where civil and informative discussion about the Cypriot dialects in Cyprus and Cypriots themselves can take place. Of course, people can't, a single page can't achieve that themselves. They have to have a network of pages who have the same goals, who have the same vision. And as we have seen with Salingo and the Dialects before, there's obviously a lot of interested people who have the exact same vision. And I do mention them, of course, in the collaborations. Of course, United Youth of Cyprus, who is a big part of this event, who is one of the organizations that helps bridge that kind of gap. There's also Hade, who is here, that is more about the teaching of the Cypriot dialects, as you will see in the presentation that follows. And also I mentioned an artist that designed a lot of the things that I use, and I kind of wanted to mention them because she didn't really take much credit, because she didn't really want the attention that much, but too bad I mentioned it here. Even though we do have this collaborative work, the most important thing is that success only happens when there's volunteers that can help, when there are participants in the efforts, maybe even in the smallest kind of ways. Like you are someone who knows a word, you go to Cyprus when you just submit that word. And of course, an audience that is interested in is supporting that kind of effort, which is like you hear today, of course, and we are very thankful for that. And thanks to you and all the other people who are interested in online, both the Rhomios page and Cylingo and CyTopic, with which I'm affiliated with, have grown and will continue. That was probably not the title, but you can infer that. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you for this beautiful presentation. And I follow your work also. And I wanted to ask, how does the preparation stages look like? Like, do you do the research by yourself? Who do you contact if you need to? Yeah, that.
Well, it depends on the topic. There are topics that I have the material kind of laying around and ready, so I just read through it, I guess. But there are points where I have to, reach out to someone. Like there are posts where it's more useful to reach out to someone who has more available material, whether material that they can read and I can't, or they have first-hand experience that I don't have. But most of the time it's just reading stuff on my own.
I just want to say a huge thank you for your work. I'm a huge fan, mostly because I'm learning stuff about Cyprus generally in our dialects, and also because it gives me the chance to share things with my Turkish Cypriot friends that I wouldn't normally. And then it makes sense for them as well. So thank you.
I think this will be our last question.
Hello, Figet, big fan. Fortunately or unfortunately, the things you talk about can be sensitive to people, and some people put a lot of responsibility on you, whether that is fair or unfair. Can you talk about how you find it difficult to deal with that? How do you process that? Because sometimes when I express my Cypriotness, some people tell me that no, I do what really is wrong, for whatever reason they say it's wrong. But when you do actual content and you post sources, so you have a more academic angle, whereas my experience is more in conversation. How do you deal with that? through your posts and the comments and stuff like that?
That's actually a good question. I guess I don't. I don't care like if people. I mean, obviously I don't want to. I mean, when I say part of like this kind of design is to be neutral, of course the design is to not incite anyone's negative feelings. But sometimes you can't avoid it, right? Like I had someone, like I mentioned in one post, like the etymology of some Cypriot city names. And some people were mad because like, what about that village that has, Turkish etymology? And I'm like, well, I'm talking about the cities now. Like, if we reach that point, then we talk about that thing, we could be mentioned. But when people have something to, when they sort of project their own image of what you are doing and what you're trying to do with the post, they will find things to be offended or annoyed. But precisely because the approach was more explicitly neutral from the start, the vast majority of people kind of understand that. So even between themselves they don't fight. I'm actually surprised because I assume at least to some extent even people who might have like slightly different opinions but are in the same camp, let's say, would still have things to disagree in the comments. But usually it doesn't happen. Like everyone is kind of chill for this, which is positive. I think that's kind of the point. So I don't have to worry that much as other pages where you have to moderate both sides because someone will pop in and will say weird stuff to provoke. Okay, so that was the last. Yeah.
I think it goes very